All righty. That's new. Okay, I guess we're on. Hi everybody. Welcome back to Conversations with Friends. I'm feeling a little rusty because I took a couple of weeks off because personal business, I had a puppy who got sick and we had to let him go. So I took some time off to really process that. He was with me for 15 years. That is I'm still not over it, just so everybody knows, but I'm getting my life back on track and doing the thing. So, welcome back. Welcome to anybody new. If you're new here, hey, I'm Dawn Scannell. This is Conversations with Friends, where I focus on mental health and wellness and normalizing talking about that every day, one conversation at a time. So now, today, I'm talking about something which I'm so excited to talk about because I didn't even realize that there were people out there like you, Joelle, who are making a point to make sure that people have mental wellness in the workplace.
Mhm.
So tell me about how you got to do this, and how does that work for you?
Yeah, of course. Well, it's not a traditional path. I think, like many of us professionals, right? I sometimes call it that spaghetti path of, leadership, but also focusing on myself and then realizing, aside from a business, there's all of these tangible things that businesses are either selling, either products or services, but that at the end of it, there's always people. Right. If you don't have the people to run the business, you actually don't have a business. So it was one of those pieces that was kind of the light bulb moment where I was really interested because it brought together, kind of two aspects that I really found enjoyable. And then I realized there's this whole world called organizational development. And, as I started to unpack that, it really started to thread together my career. And I was able to bring in my experience. So having, 13 years of organizational development, whether I realized it or not, and then 8 years within the mental health field, it really gave me this unique perspective to look at the workplace in a holistic model, not just we come to work, we type, we do our things and we leave, but we spend a third of our life there, right? Our adult life. Most people spend at least one third, if not more, because we know, right? Some people are working a little bit more, but to not build that into our mindset, to not talk about that felt like it was such a big letdown. So for me, that's kind of been a personal mission, but also professional mission, to really enlighten leaders, but also businesses, that the importance of human capital in the workplace.
Oh, I love it so much. And I feel like it's especially relevant right now because people are having so many conversations about, oh, businesses can't find employees and people don't want to work because, they're getting unemployment. And uh, I don't think that's true, by the way. And also like people who are opting to leave their jobs because they don't want to stop working remotely when they're asked to go back into the workforce. And even my husband and I had a conversation the other day. He's like, well, they're being paid if they're at home working remotely, they're being paid to, be on Facebook, etc. I said, do you really think people in offices who have accesses to computers aren't also on Facebook? Right?
I say this all the time. I'm like, if people are distracted, if you think they're going to be distracted at home, they're just as likely to be distracted in the workplace. And I always say, measure outcomes over hours,
Right.
because it doesn't matter where you are, right? And we're human. Like, we only have a certain level of tension span. And like, that's something that I think is really important to understand, because we can only focus for so long. We need breaks. And quite frankly, we've grown up in a society and been told like you don't need breaks, but science proves you need more breaks. So it's actually probably better for productivity if you're taking a minute to kind of distract yourself or recenter. But
Right. And also I pointed out to him, I said, you know what, as a woman who does work at home, my distractions are, oh, let me take a break and go throw the laundry around, or, let me prep dinner. So, but also I said to him, I said, uh, is anybody stopping to like look at, are they getting their work done? Right. So what difference does it make whether you're in the office or you're at home? And the amount of overhead that could be cut loose and buildings freed up, et cetera, by letting people work from home.
It's one of the topics that's near and dear to my heart, because I think it's something that's such a huge topic. And you're so right. There's a lot of people, there's actually a lot of research being done right now about people leaving the workplace. This summer, they're worrying about trends, because when people are asked to come back full time, what is that going to look like? But we've also opened up this whole new market. Now we were a global economy before, but now we're super global, right? There are businesses all over the world willing to hire remote staff because they're advanced, they're evolving, they're understanding people's needs and wants, and they're at the forefront of that. And when I talk to employers, I'm like, that's kind of like your talent attraction model now, right? When you're looking to attract talent, and a lot of people talk about it as work-life balance. I call it like work-life integration. And this is something that I've been talking about for years, because it's not about finding balance, because let's be honest, that's unrealistic expectation.
Totally.
We were just talking about it. I'm like, the week's flying by. I don't know where it's going. But building in that opportunity for individuals and team members to have that integration where if I have to start late because I have to take care of something at home, I have a hot water tank that burst or something like that, giving me a little bit of flexibility. Or maybe, I have kids. I want to make sure I get them on and off the bus. So my workday might look a little bit different. And to your point, when I'm taking my 10-minute break and I'm throwing my laundry in, because that's my favorite, I always joke, I'm like, can I bring my dishes back to work when I go back so I can get them done and be efficient? Because at the end of the day, guess what I get to do? I get to turn off and start my life.
Right.
I don't have to commute home. I don't have to then do all the life things that I can get done in a spare 10 minutes here and there. I can really enjoy myself. I can go for walks. I can spend time with friends and family. I can do whatever I want. Not to say, I'll say both ends of the spectrum here, because I do value being in a workspace with coworkers, because I think there's a certain level of collaboration, but does it need to be every day? Can employers find a balance that works for everybody, and also not look at it as like the golden rule, right? Not what works for me is not going to work for you. I know I've talked to a lot of colleagues and they're like, I can't wait to be back in the office 5 days a week. And I'm like, you go for it. But how do we meet different needs? And I think that's really one of those conversations that I talk a lot about, is like recognizing everybody's needs is different, and how do we assess that?
Right. And I've also been saying, like, this is the time for companies to, like, take the initiative and change it up if you really want to pull the talent, because there's people out there waiting for somebody to do that. And also, um, what, over 2.5 million women have left the workplace in the last year. And what you were just saying about being able to just at the walk away from your desk and be with your family or integrate right into family is a big plus from working from home, so that you can do those things and prep things, take your break and do that. And I think that speaks to, maybe employers really need to look at that for women in that opportunity, because childcare, right? It would eliminate the childcare
Yeah.
issue a little bit. And so many needing to take the time off, because I need a day off this week just to catch up from the last
Yep.
2 weeks of everything that's been happening. I think that's very viable. And also for people to understand that if you do it part time, like it seems like you would thrive at, right? Being home a
Yeah.
couple of days a week, being in the, if you are happy at home, right, and you have that family time and you're not stressed out about all those things, I would think maybe you show up for work a little better and more efficient when you are there.
Imagine that, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, and especially when we're talking about women, and what was it in 2020, the growth was there for women in C-level suites of Fortune 500 companies. Like, we were evolving, we were pushing the envelope, we were in positions where there needs to be representation. And one of the biggest challenges is, you alluded to it, childcare. Everyone's taking on this caregiver mode, and childcare is one, but also aging parents. We have 5 working generations in the workforce. So it's not just parents, it's caring for elders. It's also caring for family members, friends, things like that. And I think we saw that a lot over 2020, whether we recognize it or not. We all became this caregiver for friends, family, all of these different pieces. And when we try to be a caregiver, be a professional, be an executive, we're increasing our rates for burnout, right? So
Right.
I'm running on all cylinders. I don't have that time to downshift. So when I come into the workplace, I'm more likely to be distracted. I'm more likely to be thinking about things going on outside the workplace than if I were given the time and the flexibility to take care of all of those things adequately, or even have the resources. Because let's be honest, some employers still are lacking a little bit when we talk about workplace well-being and providing resources and services that provide a holistic, like, wraparound services too.
Right. And talk about that a little bit. Like, what kind of resources should or could employers be putting in place for that, just that issue alone?
Yeah, a lot of times I challenge this mindset of workplace wellness programs, right? Because for so long it's been, here's a walk program, here's a smoke cessation program, like, let's get our blood pressure checked. And wellness is most often associated to like that physical piece. But when we look at well-being, it's really, how do we support an entire individual? And that's inclusive of, and two things I look at all the time are the social determinants of health, right? Because those impact all different things. That's, ability, access, services, and then the 8 dimensions of wellness, because that takes into account you have more than just physical or emotional wellness, right? There's occupational, there's learning. And so if a business and organizations take a step back and really look at the workforce as diverse as they really are, right, with all of their needs and wants, and they're able to integrate workplace well-being programs that are inclusive of different people's needs, recognizing that what a challenge or an experience at the C-level maybe is very far from what's true to the majority of the workforce. And different services a lot of times are career development, career coaching. Most notably, you have your employee assistance programs, but you also have those flexible spending accounts. Childcare, you said it right. I've heard a lot of employers looking at collaborative approaches with this too, because there are outside vendors where employers can create this partnership where their employees have access to childcare, and maybe there's a pickup and drop off at the workplace, right? If you don't have to run home and catch somebody off the bus, it alleviates a lot of that unnecessary stress. But it could also be flexible work styles. You said it, flexibility, but it could also be shared work styles, right? I know a lot of employers are looking at, sharing workloads and splitting positions, not necessarily to make it easier, but to make it more accommodating. Because if somebody can be available 9 to 5, that's great. But if somebody's doing the operations on the back end when the time works for them, that provides a little bit of flexibility. I mean, there's a whole host of different things that employers could do, but I think it's really, the first thing is being open and being honest and asking the individuals that are on your workforce, and not just what matters to you, and also ask them, what do you use? What don't you use? Like, what would you use if it were available? Because I think that opens the conversation, and of course it's going to evolve, right? Right now we're in the mist of 2020, right? We're in the middle of 2021. We're still figuring out where we're going, but every year those needs are going to change.
Right. And just I, I I just don't understand why it hasn't been addressed before this, because if I had an employer, and I'm not in any hurry to work for somebody else, but if I was being employed outside the workforce again and people actually were accommodating the needs I had, why would I, you know what I mean? Like, my level of happiness with my employer would
Mhm.
be through the roof, like, and not be afraid, like the stress that would be eliminated for, look, my kid is having this ceremony at school, um, to not be afraid to ask for that, right? Because a lot of times I can remember when I was working for somebody else and I was a single mom, and, I, a lot of times I would not tell the truth to make sure that I could be there, right? Like,
Yep.
oh, I'm not feeling well. I really need to leave. And it's horrible to be put in that position, to have to do that in order just to go see your kid for 2 hours, do this ceremony at school.
Yep. And a lot of people are being forced to make those decisions. And there's, I mean, tons of studies about this, but, on average, it said, when we increase well-being initiatives, individuals are twice as likely to be engaged in the workforce. Right. So you want to talk about return on investment? There it
Right.
is. Like, and I always say people first. Like, at the end of the day, yes, employees, yes, team members, yes, colleagues, but we're all human. Like, we're all human. And that's like the most important part. And, you said it. And the other thing is, it also helps. There's always this dynamic for retention. I'm like, well, why are you holding people? Like, let's focus on succession and building them up. And if you're really engaging them and they feel engaged and that you're being flexible, they're more likely to stay with a business, which when you look at turnover, how much does it cost? It costs on average 1.5 of that individual's salary if they leave to find someone, get someone up to speed, not to mention all the relationships that you may have lost in the meantime by losing that person.
Right, right. Are you familiar? And this is horrible because I didn't even, it just occurred to me. His name is Dan. I can't remember his last name, but he started paying everyone in his company $70,000 a year.
I'm not sure. I would have to look. I have to
Yeah,
look him up.
I follow him on Twitter because he's always talking about the bullshit factor of what employers say that, can't be done, right?
Mhm.
Like minimum wage can't be raised because of this. So he started off just everyone, and it doesn't matter what their job is, they all start at 70,000 a year. So now when COVID hit, he had a meeting and he said, look, we can cut people or we can cut salaries until we get through this. Everyone volunteered to cut their
Cut their
salary.
salary. I did hear this story. Actually, I
Yeah,
did hear this story. And now what was, and think about that. Like, that is a team. That is
right,
like a cohesive team with one common mission moving forward. And so, you think about it from their perspective of buy-in, right? They're bought in. They're not, yeah, they might go somewhere else, but on the chance of if they leave, they're going to make tons of referrals to that business. You should go work here. Um, but the other piece is think about the customer experience or the client
right,
experience. When you get to work with somebody who really enjoys where they are or they feel valued, like that experience, like you've been on both sides and it's totally different.
right. And so now they're back up to their normal salary. I think his last name is Price. And he's like, and they said we wouldn't be able to generate profit, and they have beaten their profit margins the last 2 months. And it's like he's just completely killing all the bullshit around the traditional business models, and I love it. The downside to that is he gets death threats on a regular basis. He's had threatening home invasions. Like he came home and somebody had been in his house, and they had done things in his home to make him know that somebody had been in his house. So basically that's like mob mentality of, oh, we know, not just we know where you live, but look how easy it was for us to do this. What
Mm-hmm.
could we do next time? And I just think to myself, that's how important it is for people not to shatter that whole illusion of what people can be paid and what they're worth, and do we change things?
Well, and it just goes to the whole, piece of change management is really scary, right? Change is scary and we've experienced a lot of it. And one of the pieces I push back on is don't look at it as change, look at it as evolution.
Right,
Like, what happened if, and I'm just putting together a piece on this and it was kind of talking about this, but what happens if when the internet came out, right? Everybody said no, thank you. Or we know the businesses that did say no, thank you. And where are they today? They're not here for a very distinct reason because they didn't evolve. And there's always those, forward thinkers at the front of it. Then we have people that are a little bit delayed. And then we have the people that resist change. And unfortunately, either they dissolve or they're left behind. But I think this is something becoming, a topic of conversation because I think it doesn't matter what role you play, right? Everybody, if we're looking at this from a team perspective, and when you look at any business model or any success model, there's actually a book that talks about this. It's oh gosh, and it's not going to come to me right this moment. It'll come to me in a minute. But it looks at the way we're raised and the way we're um, basically brought up to be. It's about me, right? It's about my interest. It's about me. I have to be the best. But then when we put people in the workplace, we all of a sudden want them to work on this team, and they're constantly focused on the I, missing the team, which is impacting the overall organizational wellness. And how in the workplace do we kind of reset that? And I think through an initiative like that, where we're saying, okay, we all bring equal value, no matter what role you play, because let's be honest, we know somebody working on an administrative position, they know the people, they have the relationships, they're, you're in, out, everything. But so often we say, well, let's pay you less because you don't have the same level of college or the same level of experience. But really, they're the heart of the
Right.
organization. They're making it happen, for lack thereof. So no, I think it's, and everything's going to be different too. But I think there's always the opportunity. It's how you look at it.
Right, right. And I love that you flipped that and turned it into, an evolution rather than just change for change sakes.
Mhm.
Right. Because, on the other side of COVID, there is no, there's no going back to normal, right? Like that's impossible now.
Just did a post on it. No, this new normal thing is driving me up the wall because, especially when we talk about wellness and when we talk about mental health, there is no such thing as normal. What is that? Like, it's some abstract thing that we try to strive for. It's typical, right? What is typical? And we can't go back. Like, as much as, like, some people are like, well, when we go back, there's really no going back. We've
Right.
evolved. We've done a lot with operations that we said, oh, we can't do, it would take too long. Come on, we did it in 6 months. And some things worked, some things didn't, but there's still so much opportunity to learn and keep moving forward. There's no reason to look in the back mirror. I always say, if you're looking in the rearview mirror, you're going to get in an accident, right? Because you're looking back at what it was. Look forward. Like, you've grown a lot in the last 15 months. How do you keep that evolution? And what do you look to, ask your employees, what did they value over the last 15 months? What was challenging for them? And then that'll really create the roadmap to where do you go next?
Right. I love that. There was, and this is not workplace, but it's schooling. And there was a school district that was like, there will be no more snow days. Now we know we can do remote. And everybody's like, why can't the
Oh,
kids just get a break? Like,
yeah.
I remember growing up, it was that was a magical day. Like, it was a gift that you didn't have to go to school unexpectedly. I was like, why would you take away more magic from children's lives? That's so silly.
Don, let's
Um,
not even joke about it. There's magic in the workplace when you get a snow day. When you get a snow day in
right.
the workplace, it is
Right.
so magical. Because I'm not going to lie, we definitely had a conversation about this in like last February, March, when there was like a random snowstorm. I'm like, what's going to happen now? Are we never going to have snow days again? You get in the workplace, you get maybe one a year, but it's a really magical day because all of a sudden it's this unexpected day that you can, go outside, run around in the snow. You can eat chocolate and watch movies. Like, it is a very magical day. And if we're talking about well-being and workplace well-being, it's like integrating those, little pops of surprises, right? Those unexpected things where people can really take that time and it's not scheduled. We're not going from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., right? It's all of a sudden like, here's a day, enjoy yourself. And that's something employers can do, right? They can do
Right.
that very easily. Look at a schedule, block it out, say it's a team, meeting where, you might get the wants, and then say, we've decided for workplace well-being, we're going to give a free day, share with us some photos of what you do on your free day. And I know there are organizations that already do this, but it's such an easy thing for people to do. It's not a heavy lift.
So when we're talking about setting it up for, well-being in the workplace and the resources, what are some of the deeper resources that employers can bring in for people?
Yeah, and this is, I think the biggest thing is always training. Leadership training. A lot of our leaders end up in positions because they're really good at doing a task. But then when we start to integrate, these workplace well-being and how do we think about people first, it can be really unnerving and scary. And what happens when we're scared, we resist it. We're like, no, thank you. I'm going to stay in my comfort zone. So I think starting with training leadership is so important, but also making the organizational values very clear. Because I think if you have all these great programs, but it's not something that's focused and it's not something that's high on the priority list, that's when you see those utilization rates are really low, and the businesses are like, well, we have all these great services, but nobody's using them. Well, is anybody talking about them? Is anybody saying they're using them, right? Are executives saying, hey, I use the EAP, I took a mental health day, whatever that looks like. We have to lead by example because people model what they see. So, if your business gives rewards for not taking PTO, guess what? Your team's not going to take PTO and they're going to show up burnt out and not able to work. Other benefits that are really important, and we've seen them over the last 15 months, are access to telemedicine, but also virtual services. Because many of our organizations, people don't have PTO, right? They're working hourly. So to try to get somewhere in your lunch break, or to say, hey, I have to take a whole day off and I'm not going to get paid because I need to go take care of ABC, is really a mindset of like, is it worth the loss? And then what am I subjecting? Should I be going to get my physical? But now I can't go get my physical. Otherwise, I'd have to take 8 hours of loss. And I know a lot of employers are actually providing time for preventative care. So it's like this new hybrid of like PTO, where it's like, if you're going to a doctor's appointment, go. It does not really that sicker, it doesn't count against you. But the other one is also making sure you have parity in your services and in your healthcare. Is there equal access to that 8 dimensions of wellness? Are you providing services? And then when you look at medical insurance, what is your medical provider doing for you? Is there equal access to physical and mental health, or are there gaps? Because you can ask those questions, you can give some pushback, and also advocate for what you think your workforce needs or what you think should just be standard. And those are conversations you can openly have. But it's not going to happen until somebody starts reaching out and asking those types of questions. And my ideal would always be having like a benefits liaison on team, right? It's not necessarily HR office, because some people are less likely because they think there could be punitive, right? I might get in trouble if I go ask for this service, but almost a concierge of services where, somebody can go and just ask, hey, I'm looking for this. Do we have that? Where can I go? Or it could just be connecting them to community resources, right? There's food insecurity. We have food, people live in food deserts all over. So can we have a food service come to the workplace, drop off groceries? So that's one less thing somebody has to worry about. And I think, thinking super basic, right? Those aren't, your basic needs being met. And I think that's what employers can really step up and recognize, like where they can fill a gap.
Right. Because, forget about personal time off. I can remember when, it was a struggle just to get the vacation that you are entitled to. Like, oh, no, not then. You can't possibly do. What am I supposed to? This is not a vacation now. This is another stressful thing that I have to wrap my mind around. And like you said, I love that you said, somebody has to model that. Like, hey, are you taking the personal time off? It's really here to do that. We're not going to get mad at you.
Nope. And I do a ton of trainings on burnout because this is a huge proponent of it, right? We model it, and now it's become even more of a problem because we have these laptops and we have these phones, and heaven forbid, we have these watches that tell us where we're supposed to be. But when we're actually logging off of that time, giving people like the permission to say, do not check your email. We will take care of whatever happens, and build in those structures so people really can fully disconnect. Because if I'm taking a day off, but I'm answering emails, I'm not really doing what's best for me. But more importantly, I'm not doing what's best for the organization, for my clients, because I'm not getting that adequate rest. So when I come back, I'm still going to be running on a half a tank.
Right. Right. And I can remember, my first husband. It didn't matter whether we were on vacation. It didn't matter. He did work phone calls. He would
Mhm.
disappear on, and take calls. Or and then as things, time evolved, and now we have cell phones, and then it's texting and answering emails. He was never ever present. He was never present, didn't matter whether it was vacation or a work day, nothing. And I think, has anyone pointed that out to employers, right? Like, that has residual effects. Like, do you want the breakdown of all of the families of your best employees?
Well, think about it when there's challenges going on in the home life, or there's disputes or, disagreements, where does it go? I always say, that old saying of people leave their baggage at the door. Like, come on, let's get real. Like, and that's one of the expenses, right? That's one of the controllable costs. When we look at indirect costs for businesses, presenteeism, but also absenteeism are big impacts. And we're more likely to know absenteeism, right? I'm not there, but presenteeism, I'm sitting at my desk, but I can't connect because I'm thinking about the disagreement I had. I'm thinking about, is my family separating? Am I not able to see my family? And I know this is a big one, especially for younger generations. Am I not able to be present with my friends and family? Like, am I always at the mercy of my work? I mean, I experienced that. I was living out of a suitcase, running all over the place. And at one point, I just kind of said, is this really worth it? Like, what kind
Yeah.
of life is this? Like, I'm not actually worried about me. Where are my values? What's the legacy I'm creating? Because right now, I'm in a suitcase and in a car, going
Right.
everywhere.
Right. What kind of social life did you have? Were
No,
there friends out, did you talk to anybody outside of work? I mean,
no.
did
And you
that?
know how that will impact, right? It impacts our whole health, but it also impacts our mental health because we're constantly thinking about it and there's no disconnection.
Yeah. Yeah. So if moving forward, what would you say are the places or things that we really should be focusing on for moving forward, whether we're in the workplace or we are the workplace?
Yeah. I think a lot of it is understanding what's important to you as an individual, right? Really recognizing what's important to you in your life. And I ask this a lot of times because we talk about these mission statements for organizations, but what's your personal mission statement? Because I think we have to get honest with that and then also see, does our employer align with that? Or how do we ask and advocate in our place of employment for certain needs and benefits, right? Like that workplace integration. Do people just need a little bit of flexibility? How do they ask for it? Or, again, I allude to this 5 working generations. Is it that you're working 3 jobs to cover your student loans? So when you come to work, you're exhausted and people, wonder. So what is the bigger piece for you? And then how can your workplace support you? And, feeling confident. And obviously, we know every ask is not going to be heard. I'll be honest with you, right? There are going to be some things, but also be realistic. What can you take onto you? How can you contribute to that? And then when you think about the workplace, I think, I always go back to training and development, but really understanding what does it mean to have a culture of well-being? What does it mean to understand that? And then the other thing is, again, go back to asking people. Ask them what values, get an outside person to come in and look at your benefits and look at your culture from a fresh view, right? Because a lot of times, you're looking at it from your perspective to say, here's where we were 5 years ago. We've come a long way, but maybe there's little things that are super attainable that you didn't even know exist.
Right. So how do we even get people to realize they can advocate and get clear on what they need when the culture really still is, you should be thankful you have a job?
Yeah, it's super challenging, right? And, I guess if that's the culture, you might have to do some thinking about, am I in the right place? And I know that not everybody has the flexibility or the ability to leave, even if it is a bad culture, but also set boundaries, right? So there's going to have to be clear boundaries. If you are in a place where you can't afford to leave, you don't have an option at this moment, whether it's the reality or you think it can be really about setting boundaries, but also utilizing what services are available through your organization. So that might mean you have to do a little digging, right? That employee handbook that you got in day one, you might have to go back and dig through, but call providers, call if you have an employee assistance program, and talk about what you're experiencing, and also recognize, when we talk about health and wellness and well-being, if it's really impacting you and it's having a medical impact, most things are covered by the American Disabilities Act, including mental health and physical health. So if there is an impact, or if you're asking for a reasonable accommodation, understand what that means. And that might mean, reaching out to a legal service, just ask, here's what I'm experiencing, here's the types of accommodations I need in the workplace, how do I advocate for this? Because that's going to really give you the confidence, the empowerment, but also the tools to go to your employer in a reasonable way. And I always say, sometimes employers get a little scared when we talk about reasonable accommodations, but most reasonable accommodations cost little to none of the employer. There's tons of organizations that support employees being in the workplace, and being engaged. So there's tons of services and community organizations that businesses can collaborate with. Because whenever I say it and I say reason, business leaders like, oh, what does that mean? And I'm like, it's not always finances. It's sometimes just having a little bit of flexibility.
Right, right. And I think that was a really important piece, because I don't think the average person knows that they have any um, anything working for them in that sense, right? Like most people wouldn't even know that they could go to HR and ask, like,
Mhm.
this is my issue. Can it be solved? Are there resources for this? I'll come back to, like asking for that vacation or that personal day. It's like, oh my God, if I ask, are they going to figure out how to get rid of me?
Mhm. And that's a big factor, right? A lot of people, with all different experiences, fear retaliation, right? Or may I not get that promotion because I took that extra day off? Are they going to see it as me not be wanting to be there or not committed? And I think that's just a societal thing that we need to change, right? We need to stop feeling guilty for taking care of ourselves, because if we don't take care of ourselves, what's the point, right? Like you're just here working all the time and you're here doing this. You have to build in those enjoyments. So I think it's really kind of digging a little bit deeper and saying, why? What's my why? What am I doing? And then, like you said, going to HR and asking, like, what types of flexibility is there? What types of support do we have? And a lot of times, yes, HR is not flagging it on, a billboard, because they say, well, we gave it to you and you came on in your staff, packet, which I left because I'm like, I'm probably the only person that goes through that every year and rereads it, because your needs
Yeah,
change.
right. Yeah. And in my head, I'm going, when you said go back to read the employee handbook again, I was like, oh, how many of us really read them ever?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And you, on the first day, you're like, yep, you signed the paper, right? At the end, it says you've read it. And they give you, and realistically, when they give you that packet, they give you 3 minutes to read it. And it's like 257 pages, right? With
Exactly.
all
Yeah.
these addendums and things. And it's like, yeah, but, going back to look at that, or, asking questions, because a lot of times, even looking at it, you might say, hey, we do this, we have this, service, we have this benefit in this area, but we don't have it in this one. Can we move it? Can we share it? Like, is it something that's equally accessible to everybody? Because I think that's a big deal. I was reading another book the other day, and it was talking about, how, an organization was treating different levels of employees, from someone being on the actual production floor to somebody working in the administrative office, right? It was the perceived things. In the administrative office, if somebody had to call home or make a quick phone call, they could pick up the phone and dial out. But on the production floor, they had pay phones. Right. So it's even like looking at things like that and just challenging, what is the mindset? On the production floor, the bell would signal when you could take a break. But if you're in the administrative position, you could take your break whenever you wanted. And that's not recreating the wheel. They're already doing it, just creating parity.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So much to think about. Now, as women going forward, do you have best advice for women going forward, back either back into the workplace or advocating differently?
And it's one of these things of advocating openly and honestly and knowing that you're not asking for something that's unexpected, right? Because I feel like we have this imposter syndrome all the time where we're like, I just have to prove myself. Chances are you've already proven yourself. But a lot of times I find even myself, right? I'm less likely to ask for something that I would tell somebody else to advocate for them to do it, right? And I've done this a ton of times where I'm like, well, why don't you suggest a title change, right? Does that title actually make sense? But then when it comes time for me, I'm like, oh, no, no. Like, I don't really just, is that going to be too much? And I think some of the times we have to take that onus off of ourselves and really look at it for, what can I ask for? What is reasonable? But also, what's going to allow me to show up best? What's going to allow me to show up my best, do my best work, because that's really what's going to show through. Yeah, it's going to feel a little awkward if you're asking for that flexibility or that work-life integration, right? You're like, hey, I'm going to start my day at 9 o'clock when everybody else is coming in at 8 a.m. But guess what? If you show up at 9 o'clock and you're in a really great mood, you're going to outperform anybody that showed up at 8 a.m. And, I think a lot of times it's, moving past that and find a network that supports you. It might not be in your workplace. It might be outside, but find a tribe of like-minded people like yourself, because if you surround yourself with those types of people, they're going to be that encouragement for you to ask, for you to advocate, but also for you not to feel guilty too.
Right, right. I can remember when I was working in the insurance agency as a single mom, and while my son was in middle school, it started way earlier than high school, and it was an 8 o'clock start. It was like, look, he gets on the bus at 8:15. I will shave that off my lunch break
Yeah.
if you will just allow me to come in after I've seen him on the bus. And they did it. And for those 2 years, that was everything. That was when I showed up, I was not worried about, am I going to get a phone call because my son didn't show up at school or whatever, right? Or, what kind of mischief is he going to get into because he knows he can skip school, because I won't find out for a really long time. So when I showed up, I was completely present going into
Yeah.
the day. And that was I asked for 15, 20 minutes. That's all I was asking for.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's like when you think about 15 minutes, we waste more time at the water cooler. So
right.
for me as a leader, I'd be like, don't worry about it. Take care of your stuff. And I know when you're coming in, if I needed someone to stay 15 minutes earlier, if there was a big project, chances are the people that I'm flexible with are going to be the first people to sign up to support me, because it's a mutual relationship, right? We're a team. I'm giving, you're giving, and we're going to be successful together. Because I think that's where leadership gets really stuck. They're like, well, what if I do it for Dawn? What is this other person going to think? And I think we have to get out of that, like stop worrying about what other people are going to think. And I always, from a leadership position, I always said, I treat everybody differently because I meet them where they are, not because they're different, right? Like your needs are going to be very different from somebody else's. And we have to stop thinking about what are other people's perceptions of it. And because if we're meeting everybody where they are, everybody should be happy. And then there won't be as much comparison. But I
Right.
know larger organizations where you have multiple different leaders running teams completely differently, it can be challenging, but that goes back to, kind of that culture piece we talked about, and, senior leadership leading by example.
Right, right. And you're absolutely right about, when, everybody else showed up at 8. Quite honestly, I'd be walking into my desk and people were just coming out of the kitchen, after chatting and making the coffee and,
Yeah.
bringing they were just getting to their desk too. So
Two.
right. So yeah, it's really looking at, as far as like bosses, leaders, looking at the reality versus the perception of what's happening, um,
Mhm.
is really the small shift that really could happen.
And and that doesn't take much work, right? Like
Right.
it's already there. It's not
Right.
recreating the wheel, and sometimes we overcomplicate it. And especially for women in the workplace, it's like, be each other's advocate. Like if you're a senior leader and you're a female and you're doing work life integration, or even if you're a male, because I'll be honest, there are a lot of men taking on some caregiving roles, because in the pandemic I've heard it where the woman's, or the partners, whatever that relationship or that home life looks like, one partner had better benefits, so the other partner gave up their job and became a caregiver. And what is that going to look like, right? But I think in the workplace we're so singular in our mindset and in our perspective that we lack the ability to understand that, or to even just say, okay, whatever works for you, and let me be flexible.
Right. Right. Um, yeah. So as we wrap this up, is there anything you want to leave us with?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. I guess, the biggest thing when we're thinking about workplaces, think about the people first, right? And when we talk about well being in the workplace, it's of all of your staff, from, maybe part time staff or even consultants, all the way to your executive level. And how are you really building a culture where well being is primary, but it supports your operations and your business? Because I always say, if you don't have human capital, you don't have services or products. So take a long, hard look at that and say, where does the human piece fit into our business, and how do we elevate it more so?
Right. Because also every time they are doing their job, if that requires them to be dealing with people outside your organization,
You know, and that's the lasting effect. That's the brand your business has. How many of these businesses spent multi-million dollars on marketing campaigns, and then they have dissatisfied or disgruntled employees going around, going against all that marketing campaign, right? When really you can build your own internal brand and billboards with the people that work with you, that collaborate with you. And I think a lot of times when employee organizations think of like their workforce, they think of employees, but
right.
it's more, it's so many have consultants, right? They have people that come in and provide services, all of them, that's all included.
Right. Okay. So much to think
Yeah.
about. So many different facets to this on both sides, whether you're the employee or the employer, the organization. And I hope this opens up for other people to start talking about this, because I think it's a really important conversation going forward, especially for women, as we try and
Mhm.
figure out where our place is again in the workplace going forward, because there is no going back. Um, and it's an opportunity to walk
Mhm.
in to prospective new employers, to advocate right off the get-go, not wait until you think that they know your worth walking in.
100%, because if you are confident in your asks and your abilities, the employer will understand. And if not, then is it really the right place?
Right. Right. So yeah, we need some support groups for women around this, like.
Yeah, and some employers are now doing, they're called employee resource groups, where they have all different topics, but there are a lot of advocating in the workplace. But yeah, we do for sure, Dawn.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Joelle. I think
Thank you.
I love that there's people like you out there working on this, because I think it's so important um, for our overall lives, not just our work lives, but really just our
Yeah.
lives. I mean, that's how we need to start looking at it. Full stop. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody who's been listening. And if you're seeing this, you know how to contact Joelle if you have questions or want to reach out to her. If not, you know where to find me. Thank you so much. I love you guys. Don't forget, subscribe, 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 because that's how YouTube and also the podcast, that's how I hit their algorithms better, so more people can hear what we're picking up, what we're throwing down. Show your age, Dawn. Show your age. Thank you so much. Have a really good day. I will catch you guys next week. Bye, everybody.